Hey folks, it's Henry W. Steele, and today is Monday, December 3rd, 2018, and this is the fifth video, I believe, in the series of videos that I'm doing on chart reading, or, reading the price action in the chart here. Of course, this is United States dollar, Canadian dollar cross pair 4-hour chart like we had been using. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about price levels derived from percentages of moves. Now, here's what I mean by that. Let's say we measure this move from this low to this high right here. Well, we can derive price levels above it and below it and within this price range by using percentages of that particular price range. It's pretty common knowledge, actually. A lot of people do this, but they usually use Fibonacci ratios, what are commonly referred to as Fibonacci ratios, which is usually their 0.382, 0.50, and 0.618, or multiples of that. In other words, you put the number 1 or the number 2 in front of that for 100% plus that percentage. But I don't really use Fibonacci ratios for price that way in the Forex market, and there's a reason for that. And I will show you here. This is how I have my retracement tool set up, and I actually pretty much just use my retracement tool even when measuring extensions, and I'll go over that. You don't have to do that the way that I do it, but I just do it like this so I can use the same tool for both retracements and extensions. Now, if you'll notice, I do not have any of the Fibonacci ratios here. I have this line set at 0 or 100%, so regardless of which direction I'm measuring from, I know what this line represents. The next line is 25% or 75%, so regardless of the direction, I know what I'm looking at. The next line is 1/3 or 2/3. I don't have that in percentages, and there's a reason for that I'll cover in a second. The next line is 3/8 or 5/8. Again, I don't have that in percentages, and I'll cover that in a second. Then I have the 50% level, which coming from either direction is the same, so only one label for that. Then coming down the other side, the inverse of these levels, I have the 5/8 or 3/8, the 2/3 or 1/3, and then the 75% or the 25%, and of course the 100% or 0%. Again, it just depends on which direction I'm measuring from, the top or the bottom, whatever. So here's the deal. I measure the percentages that I do because a percentage is 1/100th of a whole. So 25% is 25/100ths of a whole, 75% obviously is 75/100ths of the whole, and then 50% is in fact 50/100ths of the whole, or half of the whole. Now the thirds, 1/3 and 2/3, are actually irrational numbers, meaning there's no whole number that actually correctly represents 1/3 or 2/3. So I have those represented just by the fraction 1/3 or 2/3 right here, okay? It also helps me differentiate between the percentages of the 1/4 and 3/4, or 25 and 75 percentages. And then down here I have 3/8 or 5/8, which again I don't have in percentages because there's not a whole number that properly represents those, and they're very close to the Fibonacci ratios, so I want those represented in a different way also. So I have my percentages, I have my fractions for the thirds, and then I have my fractions that are representative of not just the eighths, the 3/8 and 5/8, but also the Fibonacci ratios are essentially these ratios also. They're not exactly perfectly accurate to the Fibonacci's, but they're very close. So you notice I have these in the percentage numbers, I have these just in the singular fraction with no letters, then I have these with the fractions and the letters, so it's easy for me to identify it. That's the way that I set up my retracement tool. so I could identify those levels the most easily for me. And I have these specific ratios because these are the ratios that I use almost exclusively in the Forex market. And if I use a different ratio, it's for a very special reason that might show up here or there. And I'd calculate it manually and just put a horizontal line on the chart there. Okay, so let's say I'm going to measure this swing here. So I'll put a line there, and then of course I measure the line there. And at this point, let me move it like that. It's set up for the retracement, obviously, because the market has moved up here, and then I can measure the retracements down with these levels here. But if I should want to measure an extension, like let's say 100% extension in price, all I would do is move this up so that the 50% line is right here, and then I know that the second 50% is equal to this price movement here. If I wanted to do 200%, I would use the 1/3 line, so that I need to move it down a little bit more. There we go. So that moving up 1/3 here, the 2/3 that are on top here are equal to 2 times this, or 200% this, so I would know that this level is actually the 200% level. Okay. Likewise, if I wanted to move up 50% instead of a whole 100%, I would just do this. I would measure from here, but I would measure up to the 2/3 level, because I know that half of 2/3 is 1/3. So this level right here is actually a 50% extension of this price move right there. Now that might be confusing for some people, but for me, because I work with the numbers so much, and that's one of the few areas in life I'm really actually good at, is manipulating and playing with numbers. This is the easiest way for me to do it with the least amount of work. And that's one thing that I've noticed in my trading, is the least amount of work that I can put into a forecast or an actual trading decision following the rules, then that works out the best for me. It's the easiest with the least indecision coming into play for me personally. Now, you folks out there might not want to use just one tool. You might want to use an extension tool and a retracement tool instead of just using the one, or however you want to do it, that's fine. But this is what I do, and as a result of this being what I do, this is how I'm going to explain using the price levels. Okay, so you're going to have to be able to do at least a little bit of math and fractional conversions. I promise you it's not hard if you'll work with it. If you have a really hard time changing, from 1/3, like this right here, this is a 50% extension. If you can't understand why I'm using these price levels, then simple mathematics like that, you probably might not actually want to be trading until you can figure that kind of stuff out. It's pretty important. But anyway, so what we're going to look at here is the price extensions or price retracements that are used, or I should say that I use, in the Forex market, specifically the United States dollar, Canadian dollar. Here's the thing. Each market responds really well to one or two price retracements and price extensions in percentages or proportions, meaning thirds, fifths, or not fifths, but well, it could be fifths actually, but mostly I've determined for what I do, thirds, 3/8, 5/8, 50%, and 100%, and then multiples of 100% tend to give me all the information that I need for the Forex markets. Now, one thing you're going to notice with working with these ratios and these markets is that each market has a favorite ratio for retracement or an extension. Sometimes there's two ratios that the market seems to favor. Not all the ratios will be favored by each market. And this is important to realize, not all time frames are going to be responding in the same way to the same ratios. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind here. Okay, this video is already 10 minutes long, so I'm going to go ahead and end this one here for today. I wanted to explain how I use this tool because it can be confusing if you're not used to using the single tool for both retracements and price extensions. Not to mention the fact that these ratios are different and the way I have them all set up and everything is different. So I want to explain that thoroughly enough so everybody could follow along with how I use it. But because the video is as long as it is, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And I will start tomorrow, Tuesday, December 4th, showing how I use these price levels to make price level forecasts with. Okay, so this is Steele, and I will talk to you tomorrow.